How attached are you to your possessions? Could you throw away 90% of the things you own? How about the space you live in? Could you live in a house that was, in its entirety, not much bigger than your average bedroom? Hello, I'm Meghann Scully and welcome to Re-Energize, the show that looks at sustainability in all its forms and what we all can do to shape a clean energy future. Today though, I want to talk about stuff. So many of us, and I very much include myself, own so many things. Things that we don't need, things that clutter up our homes, things that are exported from thousands of miles away in single-use plastic produced with fossil fuels, things carefully planned to become obsolete in shockingly short time frames and sold to us in ways that make us think buying them is somehow essential. And when we no longer need these products, they're discarded in the worst ways possible. And of course, in many ways, we know this, and many of us try our best to negate some of these effects. Buy locally, buy secondhand, recycle and dispose of responsibly. But ultimately, it comes down to the fact that so much of what we own, we simply do not need and never should have bought in the first place. How do we cut down on all that stuff? Well, one solution is a little more radical than most would go for.
In 2020, I was looking for a place to live, living and working in Dublin, and I didn't really like the look of the housing that was on offer in Dublin, so I did something a little bit mad and I quit my job, I sold all of my stuff and I built a tiny house on wheels.
Paul's idea was a solution to a different problem, a lack of affordable housing in Ireland. So, with no previous experience, he took all of his savings and built his own tiny house. You've maybe heard of the tiny house movement. Originally, they were conceived as a backlash against huge, unnecessarily large houses, particularly in the US. But over time, the tiny house movement has spread across the world, with houses that are typically about 70% smaller than an average home, maybe around 20 metres squared, or the size of a decent bedroom. Living in a tiny house means, of course, everything has to have multiple uses and every possession has to be carefully thought through. Do you need 10 pairs of jeans? Are you really going to use all those cookbooks?
I had to get rid of a bunch of my stuff, and it was a bit of a Marie Kondo situation. Like, it was very liberating. It felt great, you know. Like, I laid all my clothes out in my bed and started ordering them in which are my favourites, and then just got rid of the top 2/3 of that. And then I ended up doing a bit of a fire sale at the side of the street and invited all my mates and said, just buy all my clothes, because it was quite a nice way to get rid of my stuff.
Tiny house, tiny number of possessions. Well, that's one way to do it. The other is to simply cut down on what you own. Paul mentioned that getting rid of his possessions was a bit of a Marie Kondo situation. And who better to explain this than a man who trained in the KonMari method, the system used by the world-famous, joy-sparking decluttering expert. I talked to Aidan Gately, who works with people to declutter their homes and their lives. If you're a fan of the RT show Home Rescue, you'll have seen him in action. Ultimately, he is about radically reducing the amount of stuff you own. Something which is not just great for your home, but for your life and, sure, your mental health too.
That's what the KonMari method, I think, is amazing in that it is about creating a more functional living space, but it's the psychological benefits that come from it as well. You know, it's the freeing of your mind. So if you can sit down in the evening and not be looking at clutter that you have to do and we procrastinate about it, once you've done it, it just frees up your kind of headspace to be kind of like, oh, now that I don't have to worry about doing that thing, I can ring a friend, I can go for a walk, I can just read a book or whatever. You know, one of our quotes is that the person you are supposed to be only shows up after tidying, which is quite big, but kind of true as well.
So just like Paul, who was faced with having to get rid of almost everything he owned, Aidan works with people to reduce what they own and then to think about consumption more mindfully. The more we think about what we own, what we buy, what we need, the more sustainable we can make our lives. So, what do you think? How much of what you own could you get rid of? What do you own that you haven't used, even looked at in years? Don't forget you can listen to our podcast Re-Energize on all podcast platforms and get the full story. Paul tells us how to build a tiny house with no experience whatsoever and how he's made a career out of building them for others, while we get some top tips from Aidan on how to declutter your life. And we catch up with some people around the country to see how they feel about trying to live more sustainably.